Hey, it's time for another edition of the Cseekly Recap. I'm your host Csomm, and I'm here to go a bit deeper into the topics that I covered in my shorts. The footage behind is from the game LEGO Batman Legacy of the Dark Knight. Let's get started with the first news of the week, which is all about Guild Wars 3. Because Guild Wars 3 has officially been announced, and ArenaNet believes the MMO genre has been stuck in the place for over a decade. With most players still spending their time in games like World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy XIV and Guild Wars 2, the studio says it's time for something new. And their goal is to create an MMO with fluid, momentum-based movement and combat inspired by modern action RPGs. The thing is, the challenge won't just be building a great MMO. It's convincing players to leave behind years of progress, friendships and investments in the game they already call home. So the real question is, can Guild Wars 3 finally push the genre forward, or will it join the long list of MMOs that tried to change everything and failed? Now, my take is basically this. When you look at the headline, it's directionally right, but it's also a huge promise that almost every MMO has made before. The phrase comes from ArenaNet's argument that MMOs have become stagnant, and most players are still rotating between the same long-running giants. So you could say that the Western studios have mostly stopped taking big MMO risks. And ArenaNet studio head explicitly said the genre has stagnated and needs innovation. And that's basically right, because modern MMOs often feel like variants of the same formula. You have daily chores, seasonal grinds, gear treadmills, time-gated progression, and monetization systems designed to keep you logging in. And a lot of players describe MMOs as a second job rather than an adventure. And that's basically how I felt when I was hardcore raiding in WoW for, around 5 years or so. So it seems that ArenaNet seems to be directly targeting that criticism with no sub, no battle pass, and to respect players' time. And I can tell you for certain that Guild Wars actually introduced or popularized a bunch of stuff other MMOs later borrowed. Features like dynamic open-world events, horizontal progression, mounts that feel mechanically distinct, large meta events, and no holy trinity requirement in casual content. So they aren't a studio with zero credibility when they're talking about changing MMO design. But when you think about it, when someone says that they will revolutionize MMOs, that's basically MMO marketing 101. I've heard this pitch from a lot of games. Their marketing is always something along the lines of "we are reinventing the genre." And then when you hit the endgame, it basically becomes dailies, plus grind, plus monetization. So for me, the real test is not the trailer or interviews. It's what the game feels after 200 hours. Now, ArenaNet is talking about fluid movement and more action-orientated combat, which is cool, but MMO history shows combat isn't usually the biggest reason games fail. I would say the real killers are weak endgame, boring progression, lack of social glue, monetization fatigue, and not enough meaningful long-term goals. Also, if you're not maintaining the game properly, for example taking care of the economy, or even worse, breaking promises that you are not going to introduce certain systems because you don't want to be, next WoW, but then you do that, which essentially happened in Guild Wars 2, what kind of message are you sending to the player base? Also, another important thing. When you're making a new MMO, in this case Guild Wars 3, what is the incentive for people who were playing, 10 plus years in WoW, to abandon that and come to this new game? Because remember, people have over 10 plus years of characters, they have dedicated guilds, cosmetics, memories, song time, all of that stuff. And it's incredibly difficult to achieve that in 2026. So overall, I would say I would be cautiously optimistic, but not buying the hype yet. I'm optimistic because I know that ArenaNet has a better MMO track record than most studios. They kinda seem aware of the genre's biggest pain points, and apparently they want to respect player time, which, is a good philosophy, but I don't know how they're going to achieve that. Which brings me to the cautious part, because I haven't seen any gameplay whatsoever. You can make all kinds of claims, but if I don't know how the game is gonna look like in terms of how these mechanics are interacting with each other, then I don't know what to expect really. We also have their ending stagnation claim, which I don't know what that really means. I don't actually have a clear picture how they're going to do that. And obviously, like I said before, we need to see the systems, we need to see the gameplay, because I'm not going to be hyped from a trailer. Or at least for me, the trailer footage isn't relevant anymore. But anyway, I could say that if Guild Wars 2 manages to have a fun combat, meaningful progression without endless grind, strong social systems, and monetization that doesn't feel predatory, then it could genuinely matter for the genre. But if it turns into daily checklist simulator with prettier movement, it will probably just join the pile of next big MMO disappointments. And speaking about disappointments, this next news is all about Elder Scrolls 6, and apparently it looks amazing, whatever the fuck that means. Because according to Xbox Matt Booty, he's seen the game running and he says it looks amazing, while Todd Howard recently confirmed that the majority of Bethesda game studios is now working on the project following the completion of Starfield. So you could say the good news is that Elder Scrolls 6 appears to be progressing well, while the bad news is that Todd Howard says it's going to be a while yet. After one of the longest waits in RPG history, fans are still waiting for their first real look at Bethesda's next fantasy epic. You know folks, this thing with Elder Scrolls 6, it's just sad. I know Todd Howard said that he made a mistake announcing the game, but they wanted the momentum and whatnot. But let's be honest, 8 years is way fucking too much. I could kinda tolerate 5, but 8 is just pushing the limits like there's no tomorrow. And you know what's also funny? When or if the game eventually comes out, people are going to push that reveal date agenda as an exact time when the game started to, enter the development. Which technically speaking isn't true because they were doing stuff with Starfield, so they kinda used that only to build momentum or hype, but essentially that kinda bite them in the ass. So what I'm trying to say is, if the game isn't as great as everybody is anticipating it, I can clearly see there's going to be a bunch of videos saying it took him 10 years to make the game and this is what we get, stuff like that, being a bit dramatic. But who knows, maybe I'm wrong, maybe it really took him fucking 8 years to make the game, and if that's the case, that's even fucking worse than game being bad altogether. All I know is that I am waiting for gameplay, like every normal person there is, because that's the only way that we can verify whether or not the game is any good. More importantly, if you remember how Skyrim was announced, I kinda expect the same gameplay reveal, 15-20 minutes of us seeing all the mechanics and everything that the game can offer. And obviously, when the game launches, I wanna see a bug-free experience. Frankly, I'm sick and tired of tolerating the Bethesda jank, because that just means that they are not capable of producing a proper game, or rather testing it before shipping into public. Because if you guys, and by you guys I mean Bethesda, if you guys think that we are going to tolerate modders fixing the game so everyone can play it properly, I would say that that time is way over. Nobody's gonna tolerate that shit anymore. And when you see what we got with Starfield, I don't really harbor a lot of hope that Elder Scrolls 6 is going to be as polished as we believe it might be. However, if they manage to accomplish that, then that would be a huge win for Bethesda. But again, do not hope that they will fix stuff like we are expecting it. Be as skeptical as you can about it, be extra cautious, and then maybe, consider not getting into the hype train like everyone else, and then we wait and see what happens. Because as far as I'm concerned, it's high time that we punish Bethesda for all the crimes against humanity they are performing when it comes to launching questionable games. And who knows, maybe it will work and then, maybe, we can get a proper game that we all deserve. And now, final topic of this recap, it's all about Pokemon Go. You see, millions of Pokemon Go players spent years scanning real-world locations for in-game rewards. And now reports suggest that data collected through those AR scans helped train AI systems that are being adapted for GPS-denied navigation, including tech with potential military drone application. The developer says the data was collected voluntarily. I mean, of course it was. And that Pokemon Go data is no longer shared with Niantic Spatial following the sale of its gaming division. But the story raises a bigger question. How much do we really know about where our data ends up? And that's basically the point that I made in my short, because today, we are pretty much exposed like never before when it comes to our digital footprint. It's as simple as that, and that's something we cannot really fight against. I mean, you can live like a caveman and be a shepherd or some shit like that. You don't need anything. You have a sheep that you take care of, and that's basically that. But that's not going to work because nobody's gonna do that. We are still going to expose ourselves, we are still going to accept all various terms of services and all that other shit that you press that you agree when you're installing the software without even thinking where your data might end up. So I reckon when it comes to this particular situation, there's not a lot that you can actually do. Because at the end of the day, they can just say, well, you agreed with all the terms, and then what happens to data? Well, you were fully aware that we might do something. So you're kinda stuck with the realization that you are training God knows what for God knows whatever reason. And you might say, well, if you're playing a game, you're not supposed to think about what's happening with your data because the only thing that you are doing is actually playing the game. And your brain is never thinking about the potential usage of the data that you're voluntarily giving. Because that's what they're going to use against you every single time. It was your decision to play the game, it was your decision to give the data, it was your decision to take pictures of whatever the fuck you're taking pictures, and what can you do about it? Absolutely fucking nothing. We can talk about fair use of that data or that your trust as a player has been breached, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that you should be aware whenever you're engaging in these activities which give loads of data to whoever you are, interacting with, in order to kinda cushion the blow that, I don't know, for example, Candy Crush was taking the data in order to train this cutting-edge AI which is used to exploit people in order to make more money for the company that's making the AI. Because that's a possibility. Whether you might think it's an outrageous claim to make, at this point in time in 2026, anything is fucking possible. So to conclude, be ready for anything, expect that anything in terms of your digital footprint is going to be exploited one way or the other, and at the end of the day it's going to help you out because you already know what you're getting into. Or you burn all your devices, go live in the mountains, take care of a flock of sheep, and you're gonna live your days happy, without any worry that someone is going to steal your data. I wish it would be that simple, but unfortunately it isn't. And on that note, it's time to end this recap. Thanks very much for watching, and as always, I encourage you to leave comments. I read all of them and I'm very happy to interact there with you guys. And if you enjoy this content, consider liking it and subscribing for more discussions like this. And that's it from me, until the next one.